I want to say thank you to the church. I know a lot of you have been concerned and reached out or prayed for Terrell's mother. And I want to thank you on behalf of the whole family. Just keep praying for her. It's a difficult time. She's been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and liver cancer, and they don't know how long she has. So we appreciate the prayers. I also want to thank everybody who was involved yesterday in doing the walkthrough for parents and the trainings for the greeters and the children's attendants. If you were unable to attend yesterday, but you have interest in working in one of those roles, see me and or Jared, and we will train you individually or get another group together. We appreciate that. When we are in the new building, I think you guys are aware of this, but I'll say it bears repeating that there will be some procedure changes, both in how we enter the building and how we check in children, designed to be as seamless and invisible as possible, and yet they will still be visible. The biggest one that will affect you as you're entering the building is, just like before, how after a certain time, I think it was 9:15, and then again 10:15, all the doors will be locked. That will be the same, except now, when you enter after that time, you'll be able to push a button and buzz, and the attendant can buzz you in. So if it's raining or snowing, and you're parked in the back half of the parking lot, and you're coming in late, and you want to come in these back doors, you'll be able to. You'll just get under the overhang and push the button. May have to wait 10, 20 seconds, at the most, hopefully, but they'll buzz you in, and then you can come in. The doors in the back will not be unlocked earlier than that. So they'll always be buzzing. But the ones in the front, they'll be unlocked, and you can come in, and then if you're coming in late, you'll just push the buzzer. And hopefully that process will be very seamless. If it's not at first, just be a little patient. It may take a little time to get it all figured out. But we are really excited that there's going to be a good level of security and also very welcoming. And of course, the front will be very accessible. The drop-off during the winter will be great now because you won't walk down that cold corridor. You'll walk right into the warm and the dry when you get out of the car. So we anticipate a lot more people will probably drop people off on that side. And so a lot of good things. With children, there will be a children's check-in process for Sunday school. It's very simple. It's not complicated. But if in the first week or two or three, you have to wait in line for just a minute to get your kid checked in, just be patient because we're just going to be working out the kinks. But it is a very good process. Jared did a wonderful job, absolutely wonderful job putting that together. And we're going to train everybody and just I think it's all going to work really, really well. And we're almost at the finish line. Of course, next week we're having a big flip Sunday where we are going to move furniture. And I want to just give you a little instruction on that before I start into the sermon. So after church, if you plan to stay and help next Sunday, we will have pizza here. So immediately when church ends, we won't start working. Avoid the temptation. I know some of y'all are worker bees. We're going to have some pizza and we're going to give some instructions. And then when we have, what we will do as soon as church ends is we'll stack chairs. We'll stack all the chairs into sets of 5. Then we'll eat pizza. We'll give some instructions. And we're going to have a couple teams. So Terrell is going to have a very small, hand-picked crew of people who are going to set chairs because that whole setting chairs is very particular. There's a lot of measurements that have to happen, chairs in the right place. So he's got his crew together that will set the chairs. We also have to be very careful now that everything's nice, painted and new, and holes in the wall have been patched, that we don't want to run a chair rack down the side of the wall and rip it up. So we're going to be careful of that. Jared is going to have a small selected crew that's going to move the kids' furniture for the same reason. We don't want to run a table into a wall. So they've got a group of people that are going to be moving the kids' furniture, and then some other people who are involved with Cheryl and Becky and some others in the where things go and the parts of that. And then I'm going to have a larger crew open to whoever wants to help that's going to be taking stuff that's on the stage in there and bringing it in here and just making it where all the stuff that needs to get out of that building is brought to this building. And then we're also going to set up tables and chairs in here for the dinner for the chorus concert and other small jobs like that. We will also have Ryan is doing work on moving media, and so if he reaches out to you, he may need some help or he may not, but he may reach out to get people to help with that. And then finally, if there's other people that want to stay and you say, hey, my gift is not moving things, my gift is not that kind of stuff, but I do want to help, then I'm looking for a crew leader who would help some people clean the kitchen. And by clean it, I mean take stuff out of the cabinets, put it back in order, wipe out the cabinets. I don't think that's been done in 20 years. So kind of take everything out, clean out the inside of the cabinets and drawers, put everything back in orderly fashion, throw out old Tupperware without lids that doesn't belong in there. All the stuff's labeled. We're not changing locations of stuff. So if there's somebody here who loves that kitchen and wants to lead that, let me know. And then people who want to help can go in there. That's actually a really wonderful thing we could do for people who would like to stay and help but don't want to move stuff. So we will give more instructions at the end of service next week, but you can be thinking about that. And if you don't fit in any of those categories, you are welcome to stay and cheer, or you're welcome to go home. We probably need about 50 to 60, maybe 70 people total doing this, and then we can knock it out pretty quickly. So we're really excited. And the one other thing you can do, and I'd like you to do, is pray that the 1,100 homes that are going to receive flyers in the mail inviting them to come on Easter, that those will connect with them at a time and a place where they'll be receptive. And maybe they'll say, hey, I do want to see what they've been doing in that building, and that they'll show up and feel welcomed and loved, and then maybe that'll be the door God will use to help connect them with his son who has died to save their lives. So pray for that. All right, this morning I want to tell you about a guy named Paul Carpenter. Paul Carpenter is an illusionist, a magician. His biggest claim to fame is that he can escape from a straitjacket in 11 seconds, which I assume is very fast, although I've never tried. I think it would take me longer than that. He's 47 years old, and he's spent most of his life chasing fame. He's wandered around the country doing magic, performing on stage, on the street, and also online. And finally, in 2024, he has achieved fame, but not at all the way he wanted. His name has been on TV. It's been in newspapers. It's been on websites such as CNN, Fox, and NBC, but it wasn't for his skill as a magician. It was, in fact, because he may be facing federal charges for election interference. You might recall at the beginning of the year when I stood up here and I talked about how this is going to be a rough year, and about how we're entering this election, and we've had so many contentious elections, and this one might even be worse because of deep fakes. All of these artificial intelligence generated photos, videos, and audio that you really can't tell the difference between them and the real thing. And that we have the opportunity as a church to be streams in the wilderness this year. We can be a place of refreshing, a place of calm, a place of peace as the world is torn up and upset because of politicians, because of deep fakes, because of election interference. And they're in knots of anxiety over it. They can look at us and say, why aren't you torn up? And we're not torn up because we know we belong to a kingdom of heaven. We know that God is in control. We can be a place of peace, calm, and refreshing while the world gets spun up, tense, anxious, and defensive over politics. You might recall on that day I talked about deep fakes. I even demonstrated how in just a few minutes an average guy like me with free tools can create pretty convincing deep fakes. And so the sophisticated people with lots of money at their disposal will be doing this. Well, that's what Paul Carpenter did. Carpenter was hired, and you might have seen this in the news, to produce a robocall in the voice of President Joe Biden. That call went out in late January to 20,000 voters in New Hampshire, urging them not to vote in the primary, telling them that the only vote that mattered would be their vote in November. Carpenter claims that he was hired by a long-shot political opponent of Biden's for the purpose of suppressing Biden's vote to give this long-shot opponent a better showing in the polls. And he has the texts and emails to prove it. How much was he paid for this high-tech, illegal public fraud? The whopping sum of $150. So, I don't want to say I told you so, but I told you so. Y'all knew it. You knew this kind of stuff's going to happen. This is the tip of the iceberg. We're going to see a lot of this year, and it's going to fool a lot of people, and it's going to have a lot of people torn up, and it's going to really wreak havoc in our society. But it's pretty clear that it's our new reality. Last week, a story broke about, on social media, there were videos going around showing Luke Combs, Miranda Lambert, Garth Brooks, and Trisha Yearwood selling weight loss gummies. Raise your hand if you've seen the videos of these big stars selling weight loss gummies. Well, that's a deep fake. It came out last week that these were a deep fake and none of these stars are they've never even heard of these weight loss gummies. So the question becomes, whose voice do we listen to, right? If you get a phone call and it's Biden, Should you listen? Should you think it's Biden? If you see a video on social media of Trump, is it Trump? And should you listen? If Luke Combs is trying to sell you weight loss gummies, does he even know that these things exist? How do we know what's reality and what isn't? What voice do we listen to? Right now, there is no universal scientific way to spot one of these fakes. They're mostly caught by how they sound. Not the sound of their voice, but the sound of their words. What is it they're saying? Does that sound like something the person would say? Voters in New Hampshire picked up on this as a scam because they started saying, now wait a minute, why would Biden tell us not to vote? That's what aroused their curiosity. That's what caused people to start reporting it to the authorities. People online wondered, why is Luke Combs trying to sell me a weight loss gummy? Why are all these big name stars trying to sell me a product I've never heard of? People knew enough about the people who were supposedly talking to them that they felt that their message wasn't congruent with the person. Well, Jesus talks about this exact same phenomenon in John chapter 10. We're going to be in John chapter 10 this morning. If you want to turn there, we'll stay mainly right there, and we're going to start at the beginning of the chapter. At the beginning of John chapter 10, Jesus says this, "Very truly I tell you, Pharisees, anyone who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in by some other way, is a thief and a robber. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls the sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all of his own, he goes on ahead of them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice." Jesus says he will call his sheep by name, and they will know his voice. So here's the crazy thing about sheep. I don't know if anybody in here knows a lot about sheep. When I was at Central, we had a guy there, Doc McCrory, he was a veterinarian, who raised sheep. He knew a lot about sheep. When I was in Madisonville, we had a kid in the youth group who, for 4-H, raised sheep and showed them and actually got a full ride scholarship for it. So kids, anybody? You can get a full ride scholarship for raising sheep. So I've been in a lot of churches where people knew a lot about sheep. Honestly, I don't know if there's anybody here who knows very much about sheep, but I guarantee as much as you know about sheep, you don't know as much as Mr. Kendrick, who in 2008 released an entire essay inside of a book that was published called Animal Welfare, that was part of a series on the brain function of sheep. Here's the crazy thing about sheep. The simple little animal actually has an incredibly complex cluster of brain cells that very few creatures other than humans have. Now, I've showed you a couple of the illustrations from his essay where they describe some of the experiments they do. But if you look on YouTube, you can find videos anecdotally that will support what he says. There's lots of videos on YouTube of shepherds calling sheep by name. They'll have a big group of sheep, lots of different shepherds. It's a mixed flock, and each shepherd will come up. They'll call their sheep out. Their sheep will come to them, and they'll walk away. That's what Jesus is describing here. The sheep will come by name, one at a time, to their own shepherd, but they won't come to a stranger. So scientists have been able to prove that sheep have this remarkable ability to learn and imprint the voice of their mother, and the mother has the remarkable ability to imprint and learn the bleat of their lambs very quickly after birth. So they constructed experiments to show that sheep could distinguish between human and other sheep voices, and they could. The traditional thinking was they didn't have the neurological capacity to do that, but examining the brain tissue, doing brain scans, they found out that they do. They have a structure in their brain that very few creatures other than humans have that allow them to distinguish between the sound of a human voice and the sound of another sheep's voice. But also, in addition to that, this impressive collection of brain cells in their temporal cortex also allows them to recognize and differentiate between faces and read emotions. This is really crazy. Very few creatures other than humans can read emotions. Very few creatures other than humans can look at one face and tell it's not another face. Very few creatures other than humans can look at the face of a human and a monkey and a dog and tell them apart. And sheep can do that. Experiments have shown that sheep can imprint a friendly face, not see it for years, and then recall it many years later. So Jesus knew a little something about sheep when he told this story. He knew what he was talking about. Sheep are one of the only creatures that have the ability to know and recognize the shepherd's voice and face. They have all kinds of specialized neurological magic that makes that happen that nobody but Jesus probably knew about since he created it. But this is an analogy. Jesus is using a known truth about sheep to illustrate something about humans. Jesus is not talking about shepherding and sheep. He's not lecturing on how you guide your flock. He's using an analogy that the people would have understood to talk about us. Jesus is the shepherd. If we recognize him as our shepherd, we will imprint his voice in our brains. We will memorize his face, and we will follow him when he calls. All right, now, I understand right now, there's some of you thinking, okay, that's all good and well, Brian, but I've never heard his actual voice. I've never seen his actual face. So how am I supposed to imprint the voice and the face of Jesus in my brain? Because I think Jesus is talking on a deeper level than what sheep are doing. You know him. You know his character. You know his words. You know what he has said and what he hasn't said, what he would say and what he wouldn't say. You know his tone. You know his intention. You know his truth. You have it right there in his word, and his Holy Spirit is living within you to help you identify his voice. Here's some examples. When Hitler tried to claim that the German church had to follow him because he was the head of government and because the Bible says you have to obey authorities, that the church would have to follow him as he killed millions of innocent Christians and Jews. He claimed that he was the head of the church as the head of state. Dietrich Bonhoeffer and others said, that is not the voice of Jesus, and we won't follow you. When Christian men went along with non-Christian men in the slave trade and later segregation, and tried to support it with out-of-context scriptures, men like William Wilberforce and later Martin Luther King Jr. said, that is not the voice of Jesus, and we will not follow you. You see, Jesus is very clear that there are thieves, and there are robbers, and there are people that will climb over the wall, come into the sheep pen, and say, follow me, come on out and follow me. And it's incumbent upon the sheep to know the voice of their shepherd. Not the sound or tone of whether it's raspy or clear, deep or high. Not the look of the face, whether there's a beard or a mustache or clean shaven. We know the voice of Jesus because we know Jesus. Going back to John 10, Jesus says this, therefore Jesus said again, very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who have come before me were thieves and robbers, but the sheep have not listened to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they might have life and have it to the full. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he is a hired hand and he cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep and my sheep know me. Just as the Father knows me and I know the Father. And I lay down my life for the sheep. Jesus is the good shepherd. And the sheep know it. And that's why we follow him. So we've been talking for several weeks now about invisible leaders. When I picked this title for this sermon series, I struggled with this term because I knew I'd just have to explain it and explain it and explain it. And I hope by now you understand what that means. I tried to build it around a story that a friend of mine told me that I've shared with you a couple different times. He was a painter. He painted portraits of Jesus, and when he would get on stage, he was very afraid that over time he would start to think he was the reason he was on stage, and he wanted Jesus to be the reason he was on stage. And so he prayed this prayer that has impacted me deeply in my life that I've shared with you, where he said, God, before I get on this stage, I want to become less and less visible as you become more and more visible until I am invisible and you are all that they see. That is the idea of being an invisible leader. Somebody who God has called to lead. They know they're supposed to lead. Moses knew he was supposed to lead. He tried to argue with God. God said, I'm not having it. You're leading. Aaron knew he was supposed to lead. Joshua knew he was supposed to lead. Eli, Samuel, Peter, Paul, all of these people who we've talked about knew that they were called to lead. God put that responsibility on them. But they also knew, and sometimes had to be reminded, but eventually embraced the fact that they were leading only because they were following God. It wasn't about them. Their task was to get themselves out of the way as they helped other people to follow God. Their task was to become invisible, not to start a dynasty, not to build a kingdom, not to create power, not to sit on a throne, not to be honored and glorified, not to have a big fancy funeral with thousands of people or hundreds of thousands of people mourning them. Moses died in secret and was buried in a place no one would ever know by God, because they were called to be invisible leaders. And Jesus is the ultimate example of an invisible leader. And you say, how can that be, Brian? He's so visible. I mean, he's Jesus, right? Yes. And what did Jesus constantly do? He constantly humbled himself and made himself a servant of the people he was leading in order to lead them to the Father. Invisible leaders don't take the glory, they reflect it. And now we see Jesus model that. And the model he chooses to give us in this passage is the model of a gentle shepherd. Oftentimes, sheep pens in Israel did not have a gate. They were walled around the outside, and there was no gate. And there was a simple reason for this. The owners of the flocks were generally not the shepherds. And the owners of the flocks did not want the shepherd to shut the gate and go off somewhere and sleep for the night, and somebody might sneak in and they might not know it. So the shepherds were asked oftentimes to sleep in the gate, in the opening. They would lay down in the gate, where if a sheep tried to get out, or a wolf tried to get in, or a robber tried to come, they would know it. So when Jesus says, I am the gate, it's a very real image. No one comes in unless they come through me first. It's a very vulnerable place for a shepherd to be. Jesus is the shepherd who himself sleeps in the gate, fights the wolf, fights the thief, protects the sheep, tracks down the one lost sheep to return it to the 99. The one who is willing to lay down his life for the sheep. And when Jesus told this story and characterizes himself as a shepherd, you got to understand, this is not like a glorifying thing. We're like, oh, shepherd, it's so sweet, this beautiful picture. That's not what they thought. I just want you to imagine for a minute that if one of our political people, new on the scene, new challenger, we're trying to learn who they are, right? And they're putting them on the news talking about stuff. I remember that when John Kerry ran for the presidency, the first time I ever heard of John Kerry was on the Today Show. And they were like, if you're of a certain age, you'll remember John Kerry from his protests in the Vietnam War. But if you're younger than that, you might know him as this. And they showed him out there windsurfing. And he's out there, and he's got his muscles showing, and he's out windsurfing on this surfboard with a sail, and he's doing jumps and stuff. And they're like, he's in touch with the young. And I'm like, okay, I don't know who this guy is, but he can windsurf. They wanted to present this young, really powerful, strong, athletic, guy because they're trying to craft an image, right? Well, imagine if one of these politicians coming on the scene and they're running for president and they go, you might not know John Kerry if you're under a certain age, but you might know him as the guy that picks up your trash. And they show him riding on the back of a dump truck, dumping the garbage can in. He gets a little on himself and he does this and gets back on the dump truck. That's probably not an image they're going to craft. No offense, that's a very important job. I'm not demeaning it. I'm just saying that that's not the image they're going to probably present. And that's the image that Jesus presents here, because shepherds were despised. That was a poor man's job. Nobody wanted that job. The shepherds didn't own the flock. In most cases, shepherds did not receive a salary. Their payment was a portion of the goods the flock produced. So at the time that the sheep were sheared, they got a portion of the wool. If they were able to milk, I didn't know you could milk sheep, but if they were able to milk the sheep and make butter or anything out of that and sell it to the market, they were able to have a portion of that. So they're working all this time without getting paid, and you know how they survived? They foraged. They had to forage for food. So while they're leading the sheep, they're foraging for their own food, sleeping in the gate at night, hoping that after several months of doing this, they might get a portion of the produce of the flock, which completely depends on their ability not only to keep the flock safe, but also to keep them well nourished. Because sheep that aren't drinking well and eating well don't produce well. Nobody wanted that job. There was no glory there. There was despise. There was a little bit of nostalgia. Yeah, David had been a shepherd boy. But other than that, they were dirty. They were poor. They were isolated, away from people, and they didn't smell too good. So Jesus using this image is not a self-glorifying image. He's not saying, hey, I'm a windsurfer. He's saying, you know what? I'm like a shepherd. You may not like him. You may not want to be one, but you know what? Everybody knows that a shepherd is dedicated to their flock, because the shepherd's life depends on the health of the sheep. So it's an image of integrity, commitment, and character, and love. It's an invisible leader. So as we go through this crazy year of yelling politicians, deep fakes, cable news, angry bumper stickers, we have to ask the question, what voices will we listen to? There will be voices that will be calling to you. Believe this, support this, vote this, act this way. Is that the voice of your leader? I'll say it again. I said at the beginning of the year, I'm not asking you to exit the political process. I'm not asking you to, if you're right, to go left, if you're left, to go right. I'm not asking you to change who you support as a candidate. I'm asking you to prioritize what actually matters. I have no problem making this statement. There will never be a politician who will fix your life. Won't happen. That doesn't mean that politicians can't actually effectively solve problems. Sometimes they do. I really appreciate that road that goes through the middle of LBL 80. That came along because of something Obama did. I love that road. I used to drive it and say, I hate this road. Now I drive across there, I go to Katie's, I'm like, man, this is so great. I don't feel like I'm going to hit a deer. It's nice and wide. I mean, it's a really nice road. Government has a purpose. It can effectively fix problems. It's not going to fix your life. If you're depressed, if you're suffering, if you're struggling, it doesn't matter how many checks get sent in the mail to you. It doesn't matter how many nice roads there are. It doesn't matter how many laws get passed. You will not come out of your depression and your anxiety and your suffering because you're driving down a nice road in a new car. In fact, after $70,000 as the average household income, people get less happy. Did you know that? In America, people tend to say they are happier as they make more money until they hit $70,000, and after that they tend to start rating themselves as less happy. It's not going to fix your problems. So when we have people who are telling us, do this, Abandon your values that say that you love your neighbor and scream and yell at your neighbor or get on Facebook and flame them about their political stance because I will then fix your problems. They're not going to fix your problems. They're not. So are we going to listen to the voice that tells us to abandon our values and treat each other horrible for a promise that's never going to come? But Jesus does have the power. He does have the power to fix your life. He does have the power to change your situation. He does have the power to forgive your sin. He does have the power to resurrect you from the dead. So which voice will we listen to? We live in this world. We participate in the power structures of this world. We don't have a choice. We're going to. But our allegiance is not to this world. And we have the opportunity during this year to be a place of refreshing to the world. Hey, I'm not torn up about it. You know, I have opinions. I care. I know which way I'm probably going to vote. But in the end, I know that God is in control. And I know where I'm going. And I'm not going to lay awake at night in knots watching Fox News or CNN or back and forth between them just getting torn up and so upset over what's happening. Will we listen to the voice of a lowly, tired, dirty, suffering, hungry, homeless shepherd? Because Jesus was every one of those things. A good shepherd. One who has already laid down his life for you. One who is the only one who can actually fix this world. And the one who is calling all of us to something better. This is the last week we'll talk about invisible leaders. After this, we're going to start talking about Easter for the next 2 weeks. Jared's going to preach next week, and I will the week after that. We're going to talk about the death and resurrection of Jesus. And from there, we're going to start talking about how we become nourished by living water. How we run our roots deep into the soil that will actually nourish us. This starts with listening to the right voice. We can fight with each other about which political party can lead us best, or we can be more concerned with leading others towards the Good Shepherd. Tyson?
I love you, Lord. Oh, your mercy never fails me. And all my days, and I've been held in your hands. And from the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Let's sing together this morning. Your voice, and you have led me through the fire and the darkest night, and you are close like no other. I've known you as a father, I've known you as a friend, and I have lived in the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I surrender now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I surrender now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. Oh, I will sing.